Alright, today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite gambling class, and that is Arcana. Because for some reason, gambling on all your upgrades isn't enough. Now you want to gamble in combat. So first off, class identity. At a base level, it's very simple. You have those two slots down there and you draw cards. When you have no engraving or the Empress engraving active, you have access to 12 cards. When you have just the Emperor engraving active, 2 of those cards get deactivated and you get access to 3 different cards. You do not get access to these cards with double engraving. Your overall gameplay will decide on when you properly use these cards because you cannot discard them, you have to use them to draw the next card. Next up, we're going to talk about the skill types of Arcana. You can easily tell these apart by the color of the icon. First off, we have the normal skills. Those are yellow and there's nothing really special about them. The other 2 skill types are specific to Arcana. So there are the stacking skills, which are the blue icons, and then there are the detonate skills, which are the red icons. These are key to the Arcana playstyle, and more important on the Empress than Emperor. To sum it up, you use the blue skills to stack on the boss. You'll see card icons by the boss or on you, and then you detonate them with the red skill, and then your red skill will do more damage depending on how many stacks you have. The boss will also glow or have an outline of the different color of their stacks as well. So we're going to start off with Empress. So as previously stated, Empress does really rely on stacking and detonating. Empress is a high burst playstyle that revolves around the spec stat. Now because you are a spec class, that means by default you are going to be a slow moving class. Though due to their revamp, they do have an option to do movement speed tripods, which give them, well, movement speed. This opened up a big build route for them to actually run Raid Captain. So from switching from the old barricade and protection rune build to the wealth and raid captain build, it personally made the class a lot more comfortable for me. Good thing is, on either route, your blue skills are all going to have movement built into them. Even if you do go the slower route of running barricade, you do have skills to react to mechanics with. Their actual rotation really isn't that complex. It revolves around getting max stacks and using your red skills. Of course, that also requires maintaining your buffs, but on top of that, you run either 3 or 4 red skills. Their damage difference is huge, and so is their cooldown time. Now I played with level 7 and level 8 gems, and overall my rotation was very smooth. There was a little bit of downtime, but it wasn't that bad. But next I want to talk about the 4 of a kind skill. This was a rune skill added to the class revamp, and really changes the rotation and how the class plays. Most Empress players only run 3 red skills, 4 of a kind being the 3rd one, and also being your least damage one and your least priority one. What's very unique about 4 of a kind is that it has 2 RNG tripods on it for a red skill. The first being one that it can reset its cooldown on use, and the second one to be not consume rune stacks on use. Every build runs the tripod to have a chance to reset the cooldown on use. This is because 4 of a kind is used at the end of your rotation. And instead of just normal attacking and waiting for everything else to come off cooldown, you're praying that this keeps on resetting and you just spam this to filler even if you don't have rune stacks. Because in that time, a higher damage rune skill should be coming off cooldown anyways. 4 of a kind on its own added a lot more fun to the Empress playstyle in my opinion. So what about Empress with cards? The main similarity between Empress and Emperor for cards is half of the cards are going to be similar in a sense that you're going to use them right away because they don't have any huge boost on them, but there are a handful of cards that make a huge difference. And these are kind of the game changer when it comes to Empress playstyle. Being a burst class, making sure that burst really counts by using the right cards at the right time really makes a huge difference. Using 2 cards together will get you big damage, but you generally don't want to hold on to cards. Because every card that you draw holding onto a good card means you're losing the chance to draw that card again anyways. I would say proper card usage is the biggest thing what can set a amateur Empress Arcana from an expert. I should also mention that Empress has a slow and steady pace of filling the gauge to gain your cards. So when it comes to Emperor, they're going fast, they're a swiftness class. So while Emperors focus on stacking and detonation, Emperor actually focuses on your normal skills. These turn the Emperor playstyle into a very high APM constant damage class, most commonly known as a piano class. So not only is it a fast playstyle, but it requires you to be constantly attacking to keep up in damage. Now Emperor doesn't run 4 of a kind, however, they do have RNG on their skills, this being the quick draw tripod, which has a chance on skill use to give you a card draw. So that on top of the yellow skills which do gain meter as is. This results in it being pretty fast paced to get cards on Emperor, which goes hand in hand with the Emperor playstyle of being very high APM. And some further notes on the Emperor skills. Something that made me not like Emperor at first was the fact that they have placement skills. Examples of these skills is Evoke and Stream of Edge. Evoke you place on the ground, it takes time before it can detonate for damage. Stream of Edge you place on the ground and it does damage in that area. These can be hard skills to use if you're still learning the fights and you don't know when to place them, because there are going to be a lot of situations where they just miss because the boss decides to do a mechanic, runs out of the way. It's pretty unavoidable, but something I thought I'd bring up because like I said, it is what made me stop playing Emperor in the first place and switch to Empress. Because I did play Emperor at launch and I didn't know the fights well enough, and I just kept on getting that bad feeling of missing and just thought Empress would cure that, because Empress is all about instant damage. And prior to the rework of Arcana, Evoke even had a longer time before it could be activated. Now another key perk to playing Emperor is going to be the range. Emperor has the luxury to play at a mid-range. The majority of Arcana skills that are close range are gonna be their stacking and detonation skills, which the ones Emperor does use are still ranged as well. This gives Emperor the ability to not take as much damage because they don't have to be melee range, and also they can still damage from afar during mechanics and so forth. So with their rotation being so fast, Emperor gets a lot of opportunities to use their cards properly, which is great because like I said with their tripods, they draw a lot more cards. I would say overall Emperor has less complex use conditions, with not much for scenarios where you would want to hold on to a card to use two at the same time. No matter what engraving you want to do for raid, you're always going to run Emperor for Chaos Dungeon. It has more AoE, and the Emperor card is basically a screen wipe. Alright, so now let's talk about cost. Straight up, Empress is going to cost you more to get into. Empress does have a higher theoretical damage ceiling, which people love to chase. On top of that, Empress is a spec build. Spec builds in general just cost more in the global version right now. On the plus side, however, if you do decide to run the barricade build, since that is a less meta engraving, which very few classes use, you can get away with making a cheaper Empress build than you would with a raid captain. And the same concept can apply to Massacres on Emperor, which makes the already cheap build even cheaper. Just keep in mind these off-meta engravings will have less accessories in the market. Regardless of cost, however, Empress is still the more popular engraving. This is easily reflected on the cost of the books. I think another major factor is the exposure that Empress got. When the revamp hit, all eyes were on Empress. It was already the more popular engraving and it just kept on going from there, leaving Emperor a bit overlooked, but over time recently I've seen more Emperor players pop up around on the global version. Now I want to say that the cost of Emperor and Empress, I think it does even out in the long run, and by the long run I mean level 10 gems. Empress will run either 3 or 4 damage gems. Generally they're going to run 3. Emperor by default is going to run 5 damage gems, but for most of you that's not going to matter for a while. So when talking about Arcana's difficulty, it's good to talk about the mental stack. To sum it up, it's how much your brain can devote to many different things at the same time. So to give some examples on things that are going to be in the mental stack as you're playing, it's going to be like your rotation, your buff uptime, health, your items, fire on the ground, your get up, your dash, boss counters internal cooldown, boss patterns, boss HP for mechanics, because sometimes you might have to pre-move. Now obviously as you get better at your class, you're not going to worry about your rotation as much, so that kind of frees up your mental stack. And the same thing goes with learning bosses. You just don't have to worry about it as much because you can react to them easier and quicker because you've seen it so many times. So when you start playing something new and you play an old boss, you're probably going to get hit by things that you wouldn't normally get hit by, and that's just because you're so focused on your class and the rotation itself as opposed to the enemy boss. So why am I talking about this with Arcana especially? Arcana just adds even more to the mental stack than you would with any other class. Your rotation will change and be more dynamic depending on your cards quite a bit. Examples are cards that affect your cooldowns, boost your stacking rate, full stacks for a limited time, increase your mana regen, instant resetting the cooldown on your next skill to use, a card that brings back your last used card, so you have to remember what the last card you used was, or even adding more normals into your rotation. These will affect an Empress rotation more than an Emperor rotation, due to just lining up burst damage as opposed to consistent damage. Then of course there's RNG on your skills. So we're talking about the 4 of a kind resets, we're talking about the RNG tripods that are going to be free card draws on Emperor, and most importantly the cards themselves. Just like most players are going to be constantly looking up at the boss's HP to see when a mechanic might be coming soon, Arcana players are always going to be looking down at the bottom to see what cards they draw. So not only is their attention diverted to looking down at the bottom of their screen, but now they have to also decide when they want to use the cards. And that's where the added difficulty in Arcana comes, and that's why I think most people are intimidated by it. But just like most other things, it will absolutely get easier over time, and for me, Arcana only got more fun. I can't say for sure if it's the hardest class in the game to play, because I haven't played every class, but I will say it is definitely one of the more difficult ones I've played, and I've played my fair share of classes so far. So yes, that's Empress and Emperor Arcana. My thoughts on them and my experience playing them so far. On screen, I'm going to show kind of the big pointers that I've talked about. I played 2 different Emperor builds and 2 different Empress builds, and now I've decided to just solely stick with Emperor. I would love to play both. However, when it comes to gems, that's just too expensive, and gems I can invest into other characters. And I'm just not one of those people who make multiple of the same class. There's too many classes that interest me and things I want to try. Like pretty much every upcoming character I'm interested in. I'm going to be making an artist, I'm going to be making an airmaster, I'm going to be making a slayer, and I'm very confident all 3 of those are going to make my primary roster. And if I'm being honest, I think Arcana is going to be one of the ones that are probably going to stay in my roster through all these new character updates. But only time will tell. So yeah, this has been my experience, my assessment of my time with Arcana. If you play Arcana, tell me what build you play and why you like it, or which engraving you're deciding to go with. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.